Some women don't run after anyone. They don't bend themselves just to be chosen. They don't speak louder just to be heard. They simply stay in their own center. And somehow, they are the ones who stay in your mind. It isn't only beauty, beauty fades. It isn't charm, charm can be copied. It's something harder to name. Something you feel long after they've left the room. When a woman knows herself. When she no longer doubts her worth. She begins to move differently. Her voice carries a quiet certainty. Her presence asks for nothing. And that is what makes a man lean closer. He doesn't always understand why she lingers in his thoughts, why he keeps imagining her. It's because she isn't chasing him. She isn't handing over pieces of herself to earn his interest. She isn't waiting for his approval. She lives as if her soul belongs to her and no one else. And that unsettles him. At first, he just notices small things. The way she holds silence without rushing to fill it. The way she listens without needing to speak over anyone. The way her eyes don't search for him, but meet him only when she chooses. There's a part of him that wants to break that calm. To meet him, to be the reason she looks that way. But she doesn't shift for him. She doesn't rearrange her days, her dreams, her heart. She lets him see only what she's willing to show. And that is what draws him closer. The more she stays rooted in herself, the more he feels still, not because she's trying, but because she's not. Something inside him grows restless. Remembers the times he felt unseen, the times he felt left behind. And now the thought of losing her becomes heavier than the thought of keeping her. He starts to hold on tighter, not realizing the tighter he holds, the freer she becomes. And so, without lifting a hand, without raising her voice, she has turned the story. He is not the one who has captured her. He is the one who has been captured. Because when a woman becomes a mystery, a man becomes her prisoner. At first, he didn't notice her in the way people usually notice someone. There was no loud arrival, no demand for attention. She was simply there, sitting in her own stillness, while the world rushed around her. It is strange how a presence like that can feel louder than a voice. She was not trying to be anything for anyone, and yet she was becoming something in his mind. When a man is used to being sought after, he begins to expect it. The small favors, the way conversations lean toward him. But with her, there was nothing of the kind. She did not try to impress. She did not try to please. Her smile came when it came. Her eyes rested where they wished to rest. And in that absence of pursuit, he felt something unusual. A question forming quietly inside him. Why is she not looking for me? The first time he spoke to her, her answers were warm, but measured. She did not rush to fill the space between their words. She allowed the silence. And in that silence, he felt himself lean in just a little closer. Men often mistake their interest for choice. But sometimes, interest is born out of the unknown. And she gave him nothing that could be neatly defined. He began to notice small things. The way she carried her coffee as if the cup belonged to her ritual. The way she paused before speaking as if her thoughts were worth the weight of air. The way her shoulders rested, not tensed, not slouched, but free. He caught himself looking for her in the room, even when he told himself he wasn't. Even when he told himself it didn't matter. She did not play games, but she understood the value of not giving everything away. Her attention was like sunlight breaking through clouds. It could warm you, but you could not control when or how long it stayed. Sometimes she would meet his gaze and hold it, just enough for him to feel seen, and then she would turn away, not because she was dismissing him, but because her world did not revolve around him. This unsettled something deep in him. A man who has been followed, who has been sought, does not easily forget The one who walks her own road. He began to ask about her, but the answers he received were never complete. Some said she was private, others said she had known heartbreak, but no one spoke of her as if they truly knew her, and that only drew him in deeper. In the moments they spoke, he found himself revealing more than he planned. There was something about her listening. It was not the kind that waits for its turn to speak. It was the kind that holds, that lets a man hear his own thoughts for the first time. He noticed she never tried to change his mind. She never argued to win. She simply let his words exist, as if they did not need to be judged. It is in such spaces that a man begins to wonder, if she can hear me without fixing me, what would it be to be close to her? But she was not offering closeness, not in the way he was used to. She offered presence, and then she kept her distance. He could not name it, but he felt it, a steady pull not from her hands, but from her being, the kind of pull that is not chosen, but surrendered to. On some days, she would pass him by without a word, and those days lingered more in his mind than the ones where they spoke. He would catch himself replaying the way her hair moved in the wind, the way her footsteps did not hurry. When a woman is whole within herself, she does not move with the rhythm of another's need. She moves with her own seasons, and a man who cannot predict her becomes caught in her weather. He tried, in subtle ways, to test her interest. He offered invitations. He shared small stories meant to impress. But her response was always the same: gentle, present, and then gone. It was not rejection. It was something else. A quiet truth that said, I am not here to be conquered. I am here because I choose to be. And in that choice, she gave him nothing to hold on to. And yet, he could not let go. She was not avoiding him. She was not teasing him. She was simply living without needing to be chosen. And that was the chain he could not see. Because when a man feels the loss of control, when he feels that he cannot make someone bend toward him, he begins to bend toward them. And the more he bent, the more he realized she was not bending at all. She was standing exactly where she wished to stand. It is here that the first bars of the unseen prison form, not out of her touch, but out of his longing, not out of her words, but out of the questions she never answered. And so, without lifting a hand, without making a promise, she had begun to capture him, not in the way of chains and locks, but in the way a song captures you after only one hearing. It plays again and again in your mind, and the more you try to forget it, the deeper it sinks into you. She was that song, and he was already humming it, without even knowing. There came a point when he could no longer ignore it. The thought of her had begun to live in the spaces between his daily tasks. Her absence felt louder than her presence, and yet she had done nothing to make it so. A man accustomed to pursuit will try to understand the terms of his own desire, but desire does not obey logic. It does not consult reason before it takes root. He started to notice his own changes, the way he lingered in places where she might appear, the way his ears searched for her voice, even in a crowd, the way his eyes scanned not for beauty in general, but for her specifically. When they spoke, her words were never rushed, and she did not seem to be trying. That was the most disarming part. Her presence carried no performance. It simply was. One evening, he found her sitting quietly, watching the rain. He joined her without asking, and for a while, neither spoke. The sound of the rain, the dim light, the stillness. It was a kind of intimacy he had not known before. The kind where nothing needed to be filled. He wanted to ask her what she was thinking, but something stopped him. It was as if the question would break a spell. So instead, he stayed in the silence with her, feeling both restless and strangely at peace. In the days that followed, he began to crave that peace. The way she could make a moment feel whole, without decoration. And yet, He could not reach it whenever he wanted. It came when she allowed it, and when she didn't, it vanished entirely. That was the hook inside him. The unpredictability. The knowing that no amount of charm or effort could summon her. Only her own will. He began to wonder if she thought of him at all, and the more he wondered, the more he sought signs. A glance held a moment too long. A half-smile when he spoke. The brief touch of her hand when passing something to him. But every sign was followed by her returning to herself, as if to remind him that she was not his to claim. He tried more directly to draw her in. Stories of his life, invitations to join him. But she accepted only when she wanted to, and when she declined, it was without apology. He found himself confused, frustrated even. But beneath that frustration, there was something else. A quiet respect. Because her no was never sharp, it was simply clear. There is a strange thing that happens when a woman refuses to orbit a man's sun. He begins to question the brightness of his own light. And so, he turns toward hers, trying to understand the source. One afternoon, he saw her speaking to someone else. And in that moment, something inside him tightened. Not jealousy, exactly, but the awareness that her warmth was not his alone, that she could give it and take it away without thought of how he felt. This was the second bar of the prison, the realization that his longing had nothing to bargain with, that she could not be won by effort, only met if she chose to step closer. And here, the man finds himself caught between wanting her more and wanting to be free of wanting her, a tension that only deepens the pull. Her strength was not in her beauty, though she was beautiful. It was not in her words, though they were well chosen. It was in her ownership of herself, the way she walked through the world, without asking for permission, without trying to soften her edges to fit into someone else's frame. She did not resist him, but neither did she move toward him. She simply existed, and in doing so, she allowed him to see the space between them, a space he could not close without her consent. The more he reached, the more he felt the distance. The more he imagined her inner world, the more he realized it might be a place he could never enter fully, and that became its own kind of intoxication. A man can tire of what is too easily his, but he will not tire of what remains just beyond his grasp. And she understood this truth without speaking it. When she did give him her time, her attention, it felt like sunlight after weeks of cloud. He could feel his chest open, his thoughts slow. He could feel the way her presence steadied him. And in that steadiness, he began to imagine needing her. It is in these moments that the walls of the invisible prison grow higher. His need he once felt does not disappear willingly. It lingers, feeding itself, in quiet moments when the mind drifts. And she never rushed to feed it, which made him feed it himself. What he did not see was that she was not playing a game. She was simply whole. And a whole woman is a mirror. She shows a man not what he wants to see, but what he cannot hide from himself. The prison was not hers to build. It was his, brick by brick, thought by thought. And all she had done was remain herself. By now, he was no longer wondering if he liked her. He was wondering how he had ever lived without the way she made him feel. It happened almost without warning. Not in a storm of conflict. Not in a breaking of promises. But in the quiet way that seasons change. One day, you notice the air is different, and so is she. Her voice, still warm, but lighter, as if it no longer carried the weight of him in it. Her eyes, still gentle, but not lingering. Her presence still steady, but no longer leaning toward his. He noticed first, in the spaces, the time between her replies, the way she chose her own path through the day. Even when his invitations were laid carefully before her, the man, now deeply aware of his longing, felt it swell into urgency. He wanted to bring her closer. to close the distance, to pull her back into the gravity he once thought was his alone, but who was no longer standing where he had left her. When they met, she had been a mirror, reflecting his charm, his presence, showing him the parts of himself he was proud to see. But now, she reflected something else. The parts he had avoided, the shadows in the corners of his heart, the parts of himself that did not know how to stand without someone else holding him up. This was not cruelty, it was clarity. He tried, as men often do, to repair what he thought was broken, with words, with gestures. But the truth was, she had not broken. She had simply grown. Her stillness was no longer a space for him to fill. It was a boundary, not built to keep him out, but to keep herself whole. He remembered the first time he saw her smile, the first time she turned toward him in a room, the first time her silence had felt like an invitation. And now, that same silence felt like a closed door. He found himself pacing, not physically, but within, searching for the right words, the right moment, something that would make her step toward him again. But she did not move, not out of defiance, not out of indifference, but because she had come to see what he could not yet admit, that the man she had once intrigued was now the man she was teaching, without ever intending to. She was showing him that desire without respect becomes possession, that longing without self-awareness becomes dependency, that love without freedom becomes a prison, and she had no interest in living inside one. There was a final evening, not marked by harsh words, but by the kind of conversation that feels like standing at the edge of a shoreline, knowing the tide will soon take you in different directions. He spoke of wanting more, of needing to understand her, of not knowing why she seemed so far away. She listened without interruption, her hands resting in her lap. And when she spoke, her words were simple. You've been chasing what you think I am, not what I truly am, and I can't give you the version of me that exists only in your longing. There was no accusation in her tone, only truth. And truth, when spoken without apology, is unmovable. He felt the weight of her words settle in him, like a stone dropped into deep water. The ripples would come later, but for now, there was only the sinking. She rose, without rush, as if the conversation was not an ending, but a return to herself, to the life that existed before he arrived, and would exist after. The man watched her go, and for the first time, realized that the prison he felt himself in had no locked door. He could walk out, but to do so would mean letting go of the image of her he had been carrying. And that was the hardest part, because the image was more than her. It was the part of himself he had not yet claimed, the part he had hoped she might complete. But he knew something he did not. That completion cannot be given. It must be found within. As she stepped away, the air seemed to shift again, out of fear, not because she had escaped him, but because she had chosen herself. And here lies the quiet power of a woman who becomes a mystery. She is never a puzzle to be solved. She is a landscape to be experienced, one that changes with the seasons, one that can be walked upon, but never owned. The man would remember her, not for the moments she gave him, but for the moments she refused to, because those moments taught him where his own emptiness lived, and where his own work began. He might understand that her leaving was not a punishment, but a gift, the kind of gift that only reveals itself when the ache has softened, when the mind has quieted, when the heart is ready to stand on its own. And somewhere, perhaps years later, he might see her again, cross a room, in the sound of rain, in the stillness of a moment that needs no words. And he will know that the woman who walks away in silence isn't weak, she simply sees more. If you felt this, if her story resonated somewhere in you, remember to subscribe, to like, to stay close, because there are more truths, more shadows, more light, waiting to be explored, right here.